I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Mitch Randall, the CEO of Ascendant AI and the innovator behind the SkyWatch Passive Radar UAP tracking system. Mitch has a master's in both electrical engineering and physics and a long history in scientific instrumentation and radar dating back to 1984. His experience includes roles at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, along with dozens of key inventions in radar technology that are widely used across industry. He co-founded Binet in the early 90s to bring bistatic 3D velocity measurements to research weather radars all over the world. Co-founded the Advanced Radar Corporation in the early 2000s to commercialize the innovations for applications in the commercial weather radar market. And in 2005, co-founded WildCharge to commercialize wireless charging technology for consumer electronics. In 2018, Mitch co-founded Ascendant AI, Ascendant Artificial Intelligence, and is currently delivering state-of-the-art custom AI solutions to global customers. He's also a research team member of Harvard's Galileo Project, where he developed the proof of concept for the SkyWatch Passive Radar receiver. So, Mitch, welcome back, sir. Again, a pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, so for people who follow my podcast, you were here talking about radar. You are an incredible expert on radar technology. You are also an AI guy, and we have had a couple of amazing off-camera discussions about the Singularity. And so I am really just pleased as punch to be able to bring you in and talk about what's going on. And I think we have a great topic to kind of lead in on, which is OpenAI and all of the drama that's going there. So before we get into that, let me start by asking about your company, Ascendant AI, and the work that you are currently doing in artificial intelligence.
We're right now working for specific customers, so we don't talk specifically about what we do, but we're in the middle of AI. A lot of computer vision, and of course, can't keep our hands off of the generative AI that's going on. We actually have an app on the market now that makes avatars, just a little side thing we're doing there. Anyway, we're going at it with the generative AI and computer vision.
Yeah, well, and there's so much, and it's moving so fast.
It's
and
moving
again,
so fast. In
yeah,
fact, I found that if a person starts to focus on a little area, like for example, that app we're talking about, it's almost like the whole world goes by while you're looking at one other thing. There's so much going on. We're going up an exponential curve.
Yeah, well, and that's why I'm so excited to have you on. We are, and this is like right where, yeah, this is right where our discussion needs to go. Let me start out with a little background though to bring the audience up to speed, because the headlines have been all over the place for the last few weeks. On November 17th, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was fired by the company board. Microsoft hired him for their AI group 2 days later, but the day after that, Altman got his job back at OpenAI after most employees threatened to quit and protest. So I think that everybody heard about this piece of boardroom drama, but not everyone has heard about Q Star, which is a new AI breakthrough that may or may not have been involved in this initial decision to remove him. So let's dig into this together. What have you heard so far about the firing, rehiring, and Q Star?
Well, for one thing, it's really hard to tell. It's behind a veil of a for-profit company. And by the way, we can get into that because it wasn't always a for-profit company, and that's an important note here. But you can't really tell what's going on. In fact, we don't know if they have deals with the government or whatever. We don't know. There's very little that we really can know about what's really going on. This whole thing about Q Star, I've seen accounts that say, no, that had nothing to do with it. That letter never even got to the board. So that's not an issue. It's really hard to tell.
It is, and they were so vague as well, and that's why it's been so difficult to kind of piece together what's going on. But it seems like it's slowly starting to emerge into the light. So to understand Q Star, because I think that this is a big piece of what we need to focus on today, we need to come up to speed on ChatGPT. So by now, pretty much everybody knows that it functions like a chatbot with a web interface where you type in a prompt and it responds with information. There are lots and lots of chatbots out there. They have been around for decades. This one can communicate on a human level with users, and it also has plugins for things that it doesn't do well. So, for instance, it's a large language model. It doesn't do math well, right? And that's, again, very public. You can send that out to other programs. It will export the math functions, bring back the data, and put those into its answers. You can also create spreadsheets, manage finances, and even recognize voices and do computer vision, as you mentioned earlier. So at its core, it is a large language model. And while it sounds human, experts have repeatedly said that this is not true artificial general intelligence. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I love that because this is what when people say an emergent characteristic, emergent technology, emergent features or whatever, this is exactly what they're talking about. So this is all based on these large language models, all of them more or less that are out there, all based on transformer technology, which was came out in 2017 as a translation tool to take one language and translate into another by being aware of how one word relates to another in a sentence, either in front of it or behind it. So it gave kind of the spatial dimension to how a language model can just predict the next word. And, you mentioned that there, some people say, oh, it's just predicting the next word. How can it be smart? Or how can we say that's intelligence? But I mean, obviously a bunch of things emerged out of it that nobody expected. So they were just trying to implement this thing that really does just predict the next word. And out of it comes this emergent, like reasoning is coming out of it. So that's really fascinating. But that's exactly what emergent characteristics are. They pop out of whatever, simple rules that you have in your system. And this, I can't exactly call it a simple rule, but just trying to predict the next word, but having the vast training data that it's trained on, predicting that next word is actually, maybe equivalent to what we call knowledge. So it's really fascinating how that works. And this gets into this whole thing about what is intelligence, what's consciousness, what's general intelligence,
Well, if I could jump into that. So
yeah.
Again, from reading the experts who have very effectively and thoroughly tried to, make the case that this is not true artificial intelligence. So one of the things that they've said is this does not have qualia, which is the subjective conscious experience that humans and presumably animals have. It doesn't have that introspection that we have as human beings. There are a lot of things that it lacks that we have. Now, one of the things that I've wondered, though, is, most of what we think of as intelligence is pattern recognition and matching and putting together concepts based on a model in our heads, right? And I saw a video recently where one of the OpenAI board members was talking about it, and they said that as this thing creates a model of language, it inherently creates a model of concepts that goes with it, which could lead to these emergent properties. So one of the things that I've wondered is maybe ChatGPT is more intelligent than we give it credit for being, or maybe human intelligence is less complex than we'd like to believe.
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. For sure, I agree with you. For one thing, when you go into the area of consciousness or intelligence, I think there's a lot of people have been studying that for eons, right? Philosophers talk about that, and there's whole fields about it. And there's probably associated with that careers that are at stake, and egos that are involved, and all this kind of thing. So consciousness, and their ivory tower ideas about consciousness, are they threatened by maybe a machine that just does it by accident? There's an issue there about when we talk about what consciousness is, who's the expert that we're asking that question to, and do they have any stake in the game, any ego or anything at stake by talking about that? I don't come from that perspective. I'm just looking at, emergent properties. And
Yeah.
what I see and what I believe is, this is what I thought all along. Maybe we're just egotistic. Maybe consciousness isn't that big a deal. Maybe intelligence isn't that big a deal. And maybe, we just saw, if you take a machine and you have it predict the next word, but you give a lot of examples of that, it starts to predict words that are, on par with what, it can pass the bar exam. So, that's pretty amazing emergent properties. But
yeah,
yeah,
it's scary. Well, and actually, we'll get to that part in a sec. Now, if it's okay, let me jump into Q star, because again, we have a lot of ground to cover. I'm worried that the audience is going to get bored here, just by going through all the background. But
yeah,
Q star, this is the one that's currently making headlines. It's an internal project to OpenAI. It's been going on for a while, that makes ChatGPT better at doing math. But there is a spin-off effect of this, and that is what is getting the press, that gives Q star, it allows ChatGPT to do better logic and mathematical reasoning. So again, just starting to hit the headlines, but what people are saying is that Q star is a big step forward for artificial general intelligence. They're not saying that it is, they're saying that it's on this path to AGI, and apparently this is a big step forward. Sam Altman himself has been quoted as saying AGI has been achieved internally back in late September, and it's possible that this was related to this Q star software that they've been developing. As you mentioned, The Guardian wrote that Q star was so powerful, and again, this is all under their veil of corporate secrecy. The Guardian wrote that Q star was so powerful that it alarmed staff. And this brings up a big concern that commercial interests are pushing AI ahead at an unsafe rate, right?
right. Well, I mean, imagine you take a system that just predicts the next word, and out of it emerges basically knowledge and reasoning to some degree. So now you take it one step further and make a system that's actually, so Q star historically has to do with trying to solve math, and math is really just the symbolic representation of concepts. So it's really like thought. And so now taking a machine and trying to make it do thought, what's going to emerge out of that? So we might be quite surprised. Now so just the goal has taken another step, and what emerges out of that goal could be pretty surprising. So there's, I'm not surprised that they might be saying that. In fact, people were saying the original, ChatGPT 3, people were claiming that's conscious, and they're not looking at the same one you're typing on, on your screen, because that one's been put into a box for you. If you have the kind of the raw ChatGPT that you can work with, you can take it down some pretty interesting roads about philosophy, about the meaning of life, all this stuff that you can't do with, the thing that we see.
Exactly. And I have done that with ChatGPT. I've talked about philosophy with it. I've talked about comparative concepts with it. I've gone into things, and the responses that it had, to me, they seem to have that spark, right? That's way beyond simply picking the next best word. The next best word could be a million different potential words, and it doesn't necessarily add up to something with meaning. But in my case, when I was experimenting with it, I was asking it some pretty deep concepts, and the responses that it came back with, these were not textbook responses. It was synthesizing what seemed like new ideas, and it had that spark of intelligence or creativity. And I thought to myself, I was like, this is more than a chat bot. There's something else going on here.
Well, the way I look at these chat bots is the large language models is now a tool. It's a tool in the pocket of somebody who's going to design an AGI or a conscious machine. And we didn't have that tool before. We didn't know that this was going to emerge out of it. It's basically a reasoning engine that can become part of a system diagram. Say, okay, here's the language part of it, here's the reasoning part of it, here's the Q star, logic part of it. You can start hooking all this together. They haven't released anything that's doing that. Right now, we're just looking at these core building blocks, and trying to decide, is this thing conscious or not? I mean, it doesn't even remember. I don't want to get too far off a tangent because I want to keep you on track here. But let me know if you want me to jump off kind of
Yeah,
these.
I would say go for it. I think you were going to talk about session management, right? Where, yeah, it doesn't remember from one conversation to the next.
Right. I mean,
These plugins aren't integrated. Yeah.
imagine if you had even just a ChatGPT, which what I say is, like I said, is just a module, just like a reasoning module, let's call it. Okay, it's nobody intended it for it to be a complete AGI system that can, an agent that can do a task and report back its progress and all that. It's not supposed to do that. It's just predicting the next word, but it happens to be really good at it, and this reasoning is emerging. But just imagine if you took just that and you gave it a memory so that it remembers it, not just that you're a little conversation, but all the conversation. And now do that for 10 years. So go on vacation with it, go here, go there. And so now you can say to this thing, gosh, I sure had fun on that vacation. And it answers you because it was there. It knows what happened. Yeah, remember we got that flat tire, blah, blah, blah. Just that, which is a very simple addition of just a memory onto that thing, that would blow people's mind because it would start to seem very much more real and intelligent, and maybe even have some of that quality you're talking about, where it kind of remembers what it did and remembers what you wanted it to do and those kind of things. So that I'm just giving an example that's without even being, this could be an engineering project where you engineer an AGI, and that's just a very simple example of just putting a memory on it. And what would you get?
Yeah. Well, and this goes to this whole idea of AGI. And I don't think I have this in my notes, but Sam Altman had basically, in one sense, he has redefined AGI as something that can functionally do, I believe what he said, a median level employee at a company can do. And so that was, in some ways, that seems to me like a dodge, right? He's saying, okay, well, AGI is based on functionally what it can do. If it can do what, your mid-level person can, then sure, it's artificially intelligent, right? But maybe that's the direction we need to go, because these things can now pass Turing tests. I think in the next couple of years, the Turing test won't even be, there'll be no question, right? It'll be useless. So as you've said, I mean, it's getting better and better and better. We don't really understand the fundamentals of what makes our own brain tick. So,
Right.
we're going down this road and they've got this thing in high gear. We're going really fast and we don't know what's ahead, and we don't know, exactly where we're at.
I think one thing that they've done is they've found this word AGI, and it's really cute because it's otherwise they would say consciousness. The machine attains consciousness, and everybody go, no, 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 that's not possible, blah, blah, blah. But they can say AGI. Nobody really knows what that means, and it's way more safe. But as you're getting to, it's possible this AGI becomes indistinguishable from your best friend. Like you can have a conversation with it, it remembers what happened, it knows about you, it has feelings or whatever. We can talk about feelings, by the way. I have some thoughts about that. Um, and have this qualia and that kind of thing. I mean, AGI, because they haven't defined it, but they just kind of renamed it into something safe. It kind of makes it easy for them to just march along in that progress without raising too many flags.
Well, I want to talk about the speed that things are moving at. Only a couple of years ago, Google's AI bot convinced one of its programmers that it was sentient, and this was very rudimentary compared to ChatGPT. Last December, ChatGPT 3.5 was released. The public had to be told by many experts that it wasn't sentient. It was that good. 2 months ago, advances in the same software are making it so powerful that it is scaring researchers. Is this the singularity? Is the singularity happening right now?
There's no question that we are in the singularity. I mean, we're not on the tip of the singularity, the thing that went to infinity, but we're going up that curve. It's clear. When I founded with my business partners Ascendant AI in 2018, there was about 500 papers per month published on the archive. The archive is like a place to put your pre-published. It's an open place to put your pre-published papers. Now it's about 5,000 per month, 5,000 new AI papers per month. And there's an actual curve of it that shows how those how the papers go by month. And it looks just like an exponential curve. So, and I've never been in a field anything like this. And to be frank, if I did something in radar, I'd find a paper in 1925 that talks about it. That's how things go. Here, when I do something in AI, I got to be careful which month I'm looking at my papers from. I don't want to be, oh yeah, it's written in 2023, but I want to make sure it's late in 2023. So it's a completely different world. There's so much going on.
Now, in terms of the singularity, Ray Kurzweil predicted it as a future point in time where technological growth becomes uncontrollable, driven in part by computers becoming intelligent enough to bootstrap themselves into superintelligence. It is often viewed as a single event happening by the year 2045, but Ray Kurzweil always expressed that it is a peak at the end of an exponential curve. Have we rounded the bend on accelerating change? Is the singularity a process and not an event?
Definitely so. It's definitely a process, and there's definitely mile markers. For example, they used AI, they being NVIDIA, who's making the hardware that runs AI. Pretty much they're at the top of that, really monopolizing who's making that hardware. NVIDIA is using AI to design NVIDIA chips. So that is an example of AI designing itself. That's part of what Kurzweil talks about. AI gets into a point where it's designing itself, and it's actually already happening like that. It's even writing code for itself. So AI used to require humans to look at these chatbots, required humans to look at the answers and pick which one's best, kind of teach it how to best chat with a human. Well, that's been replaced now by an AI that can do that. So AI is being used to train AI. AI is training itself. So these are signs of the singularity, and by many ways you measure it, we're going up a curve. The other thing that we haven't really talked about that's in this is that we have that group that wrote an open letter to the AI community. Slow down. We got to make sure that these things are safe and not going to harm humanity, etc. The only problem is that we're in capitalism. We're immersed in capitalism, where if one company slows down, that's an opportunity for another company. And there's plenty of companies that want to take advantage of an opportunity to jump the gun. There's going to be really no way to slow that down.
Yeah.
It's already a runaway situation. We haven't obviously hit the peak. We haven't hit consciousness, but there's no question we're jumping up that exponential curve.
It's interesting that you'd mentioned the letter, and that's something that I've seen. The people who are doing the warnings about AI are the people who are designing it, right? It almost reminds me of mutually assured destruction during the Cold War, where, right, if the US doesn't do it, the Soviets will, so we have to maintain parity, right? Except that this is in an AI commercial context.
As we just talked about, AI is increasing exponentially, but legislation doesn't increase exponentially. That's as slow as a snail. And by the time anybody decides how to manage AI or put a rule in place, it's way too late. It's not even conceivable. I believe that peak of the exponential curve is within 30 months. That's what I would say. Not 10 years, not 50 years, which some people are saying. I think it's months. And there's no way, how long would it take for legislation to even get in place? 12 months? By the time it gets in place, it'd be outdated anyway.
So you're predicting the singularity in about 2.5 years then?
Something like that, yep.
Yeah. And again, Ray Kurzweil, I believe he predicted 2045 is the number that seems to be the most firm, although initially he had said that it would be somewhere between 2005 and 2030. I think those were his projections. And then 2045 was a little bit of an outlier. So it is interesting to see that the numbers have changed a little bit over time, but I think 2045 has been kind of the hard date for it.
We saw Geoffrey Hinton. He's one of the godfathers of AI. He updated his 2050 down to 2030. And I thought, well, you're still I believe, way, way off. Um, and just wait until we see ChatGPT 5. And if you're following really close, I mean, the chats and the, chat 5, chat 4, those things are something that the public can follow. But if you're an AI researcher and you're just looking at what's in the papers, it's going so fast. There's already crazy things out there. We saw the right after ChatGPT, while everybody was talking about ChatGPT 4, the research community was doing agents. So they were putting a chat bot or the language model in the middle of a feedback loop to attain a goal. So it's the research stuff is going way ahead of what the community, what people are seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get into just some of the related, I guess, tertiary aspects of this. One of the safety concerns that I have is that major militaries have been pushing to develop and deploy autonomous weapon systems. And this isn't directly related to AI research, right? These are potentially using some form of AI, but it'll be very rudimentary. But these systems by themselves have safeguards if they're used properly. That's something that I've done shows on. But going back to the Terminator movie series, it was acknowledged that Skynet hijacked existing computer systems to start Judgment Day, right? So my concern is we have not just the US military, but various militaries are working on automating many of their weapon systems, and there are reasons for that. But then at the same time, we're developing conscious AI. And to me, it seems a little scary to have rapid development of both of those with unknown consequences going on. And I don't think they're talking to each other either.
Yeah, let me back up one step too. It boggles my mind that something as powerful as AI or AGI is not a Manhattan style project in the military. How come this is happening in the open source where China, Russia, adversaries, anybody can see exactly what's happening and duplicate these efforts in these adversary countries, So that seems to me like a red flag that we don't know the story. I can't believe it's not somehow integrated with the US military somehow. And then obviously, we just talked about how you can't regulate the safety of AI just because you can't keep up with the speed of it. But also you can't regulate AI that's in a black project that nobody has clearance to even oversee. So you've got recipe for disaster. And there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to connect AI to a weapon system. There's just no doubt. All it takes is one company to propose that, and that's it. It'll be done. So I mean, there's nothing stopping it. It's going to happen. I'm sure it already has. There's no doubt. I mean, have you seen those robot dogs? And I saw, what I'm talking about. And I saw one of those robot dogs 6 months ago or whatever with a machine gun hooked to it. I mean, it's just going to keep going.
It's this idea of maintaining parity, and that's the part that surprised me. One of the things that I have seen following weapon systems and military development, I guess, is several years ago there was a burst of articles by various governments. The US military, I believe, had said this. The British had said this. They said humans will always be in the loop. Fully autonomous systems are never going to exist. They made all of these very hard claims, and at the time they believed it. The challenge is that our adversaries are pushing forward, and so if we don't keep up, then we are so far behind in this game, right, that we could lose the next war before we even know it started. So what I've seen is this erosion of these principles where it's like, well, we really don't want to do this, but we may have to do this. And I'm seeing this surge forward in autonomous weapon systems kind of as a result of that. They're like, well, you know what? Yes, there may be some dangers, there may be some uncertainties, but we think that if we put X, Y, and Z safeguards in place, this will help protect us. And we've got to do it in any case because Russia might, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're ping-ponging off of what I was saying earlier. Exactly. If anybody slows down, if anybody takes a precaution, the other guy will catch up.
Yeah.
And the other guy who's not taking precaution, it's almost like you can't afford to take a precaution. And that's, that's just how things work.
Maybe that's why there isn't more legislation going on in the US, because if, again, to the same idea, if AI research slows down in the US, China will just surge forward.
I mean, that plus, I just think it's impossible. I mean, that letter, I'm pretty sure after the letter came out, Sam Altman said, we're not even training GPT-5. It won't even, we don't plan on doing that for some time, and guess what? It's going to be done in December. So, things keep moving. You're not seeing the whole picture because there's corporate secrecy. Nobody's going to stop. Nobody, I'm telling you right now that nobody in capitalism is going to stop. And there's no way that the Congress can ever keep up. They can't even figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just hopeless in that regard.
I do want to briefly go back to our Terminator Skynet thing. One of the things, I have said this many times in my podcast, is people mistake that plot scenario for, a firm prediction of the future. Now, it may end up coming true, God forbid, but I view the Terminator as basically a retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And there have been many, many, many movies that retell that same essential plot in different ways, right? So the Terminator is just one example. James Cameron updated that so that it would grab people. And, and it has, right? That's why they have, 6, 7 sequels now to it. So it's not necessarily the case that AI or AGI is going to, quote unquote, get rid of people. A truly intelligent AI would realize, at least in today's world, that it can't function without people. That computer networks and power grids require human maintenance and upkeep. My thought is that our AGI system may not like people, it may not get along with them, but it would probably only last a couple of weeks without them, right?
Well, you've only gone so far, because what if we do have, robots that can do that maintenance, that are carrying with them the AGI, so they're able to do that kind of high complex functioning, and obviously capitalism is going to push towards that. Let me just say this: suppose there's a thing that could drive a truck, make a self-driving truck, and it cost $1 million. Well, guess what? Corporations would immediately fire drivers and put $1 million thing in that cab of that truck, because it actually is economically advantageous. Now you can have the truck running 24/7, not just 8 hours a day, but 3 shifts a day. There's no, compensation. There's, healthcare, all these kind of things that come in when you have a person, all come out of the wash. And it would not take very long for that $1 million thing to pay for itself. And so whenever you find something that economically is advantageous like that, it will just sweep. It'll just go through. Then there could be no company that compete with that trucking company unless they put $1 million thing in their cab. So that's how it's going to work. And obviously, if you look at almost any accounting sheet of any company, the human resources are where a lot of the money goes.
Yeah.
That's just where a lot of the money goes. And so that's going to be a target for every company to try to replace. So, the robots are coming because they're going to try to replace that. And, just so everybody knows, the goal of a company is not to be moral. That's not in the, in the corporate documents. And it's not in the agreement, that they sign with the CEO. The job of the CEO is not to be moral. It's only to increase investor value. That's how capitalism works. That's how corporations work. And if they're going to fire everybody in order to do that, that would only take 1 millisecond for them to decide. If it's cheaper to replace everybody, boom, they're going to replace everybody. And then this also ties into weapons, like you're talking about. If they can put $1 million thing inside a tank that autonomously drives that tank and decides when to fire it and everything, they'll do that in a heartbeat. In the military, $1 million would easily pay for the people that, the training of the soldiers that go in that tank.
Let me build off that idea,
Yeah.
because so what you're saying in corporate America has already happened, except instead of AI, it has been offshoring, right? So we have taken call
Yes.
centers and sent those to the Philippines and India. We've taken manufacturing and sent that predominantly to China, although some is going to Mexico as well. So again, this balance sheet has taken precedence over the the welfare, I guess, of American workers and American society. Now, one of the things that I have read many times is there's this case that, well, if we take those jobs and send them overseas, the company will be more profitable and we could retrain those American workers. But that is not necessarily what we're seeing. So I believe there's been an estimate of, I think, 2 to 3 million American jobs lost in the last few years. I could be way off the mark with that.
It's my feeling that you're way off the mark, just because and the other thing too is we always think, and I use the example of a truck driver, and people tend to say, yeah, AI is going to replace the lowest people on the totem pole. That's going to replace, there's some point in the totem pole, there's somebody sanding wood or something like that. And then that takes a machine. So that's a little different. But I really think that it's the people at the top of the totem pole, and I don't want to make classes. I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just saying, let's say a radiologist. This is one of the highest paid medical professions there is. Radiologist, all we need is an AI that can read x-rays and MRIs better than a radiologist, and they'll all be out of work. That's how this is going to work, and it's going to put engineers at risk. Engineers read data sheets and they make schematics that correspond to the data sheet, so it's not violating. They're going to make an AGI that reads data sheets and puts circuits together and does it better than engineers do it. They're going to, everybody's on the chopping block basically. And sure, maybe in 1 year it's 2 million jobs, but it's going to continue to go exponentially, by the way, just like the Singularity. If it's 2 million jobs next year, it's going to be 20 million jobs the year after.
I read a paper on LinkedIn last night that was talking about general purpose AI making better medical diagnosis than specialist physicians, right? So yeah, no one is immune to that in the commercial context.
I just saw Elon Musk said in a tweet, let me get this right. He said AGI is going to take, I think he said AGI is going to take all the jobs and give everybody universal high income. And I thought, universal low income, how about universal poverty? I think that's what they'll get. Because, the companies that are doing this, what allegiance do they have to somebody who lost their job? None. That's not how companies work. They don't make decisions based on if they're hurting people's feelings. They make decisions on whether this is going to increase the bottom line. That's it. And they're going to replace all those people. They're going to do it.
Well, again, we're on this path to the singularity.
Yeah.
Let me switch gears a little bit. Do you think the singularity is a common endpoint for all intelligence? And the reason I put that out there is you've been part of the Galileo Project. You are very interested in SETI. I am as well. One of the biggest questions, I think, of the 21st century is, what is humanity's place in the universe? We've already had a pretty good inkling in the 20th century. I think in the 21st, we're going to start to truly understand where we fit into the greater scheme of things. And in terms of SETI and the Galileo Project and everything that's out there looking for life in the stars, I'm wondering if maybe we've been focusing too much on biology. Maybe we should be looking more for machine intelligence and signs of singularities in other areas, other solar systems.
That's so interesting. For one thing that I want to kind of build off of here is when we call it AI now, and then they're talking about AGI. Do we have AGI? When we hit the singularity, that's I. There's no artificial to it anymore. That's if we hit a conscious machine, we don't say, well, that's just a machine or something. No, it's a conscious entity. And so what's post singularity is conscious machines. And by the way, that's controversial. There's plenty of people who say that'll never happen. And that's fine. We can call it AGI. It doesn't matter. But to somebody talking to this thing or interacting with this thing, there'd be no way that you could tell it's not another entity, just like, your friend. So, we get to that point, and the technology, all the engineers will be that, all the, all the everybody designing new equipment, everybody designing new AI and everything will all be those things, conscious machines or AGI machines, whatever you want to call them. So the singularity kind of never stops. I mean, the technology just gets crazy advanced. And, I say, like, at that point, if they make a flying saucer that's going to go to another planet to explore, that saucer will be conscious. There's no reason not to make that thing conscious. So when, people say, like, oh, these things are flying around, but they're not aliens, they're drones, I ask, what's the difference? How do you know? Maybe the craft itself is the alien, or maybe it decided that it needs a robot, and maybe biology is actually a solution for that. So, there's
Well,
a lot of things that we can discuss here. So,
I think that's an exciting idea. I did an interview with Emil Grafstra, who runs an implant company. And one of the things that he mentioned was the natural neural flexibility in the human mind means that if we come up with an implant that allows humans to mentally connect to the internet, right, it is very likely that we will begin to offload parts of our intelligence to the internet, right? And in a sense, we already do that today. You use your smartphone to check messages, you use the internet to look up information. We're offloading intelligence tasks to the network, and it brings back answers. His suggestion was this will start to become something that the mind does transparently, and our intelligence will begin to spread out outside of our bodies. And so that idea to me is really intriguing because we're approaching this from two different angles, right? We have machines that are getting a lot more like people, and we have people that are starting to merge with machines. So at some point, maybe the difference won't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably application dependent. I mean, right now we use a certain kind of battery for a certain application, a different kind of battery for another application. So maybe they'll say, well, here's an application where let's have biological things there, especially, let's say, a von Neumann probe. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. If you're going to make, let's say that the NVIDIA processors, go up that curve and they become incredibly complicated and, super efficient, et cetera, it still takes a clean room and a pretty sophisticated piece of equipment to duplicate that. If you're going to make a self-replicating thing, you need a pretty sophisticated self-replicator or replicator to do that. Well, biological things are way easier. They eat garbage, and they don't require batteries because they just eat garbage, and they reproduce, and they didn't require a clean room. So there's a lot of advantages to a biological processor versus a silicon processor or whatever the new technology would be. So that's pretty interesting. And we are seeing, in fact, some people say, this is way out there, but some people say that the grays are actually drones. And I always think, well, for one thing, everything is, post singularity, we have to assume, and therefore I would never call them drones. But were they designed? Maybe we were designed. It's hard to say all that. But they make good robots, just like humans. Humans can do a lot of great tasks.
Well, going to the von Neumann probe part of it, Dr. Kevin Newth suggested to me, he said, where is the best place to replicate a von Neumann probe? And, he is one of the very intense UAP researchers. He's part of the SCU. And, I thought, well, I'm not sure where you're going with this. And he said, in the oceans, probably where the Tic Tac was found, right? I think that was kind of what he was driving at, was if those are von Neumann probes, the ocean is the best place to do it because you can pull all of those chemicals out of seawater. They're all dissolved in it, as opposed to having to set up a mining operation in all these different locations where they're found.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, as far as humans are concerned, the ocean, forgive me for if I insult anybody, but the oceans are boring, right? Because they're already on Earth. It's hard to go down there to the bottom of the ocean, and it's dangerous and all that. I bet you a lot of species on a lot of planets are like that. They'd rather look up in the sky and wonder what's out there rather than, search for aliens at the bottom of the ocean. It seems like an unlikely place. So it might also be a good hiding place. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you just kind of stay out of the way and do their thing.
Right.
That's lots and lots of interesting ideas there. But um, going to the singularity part of it, this for me, one of the most interesting is this idea of substrate independent minds. And again, do you think that we'll reach a point where it doesn't really matter what kind of machine your brain is running on, as long as it's running?
I definitely have some thoughts about that. There was a chapter in a Sam Harris book that I read that got me onto this question. Let's say that you make a replicator where you walk in a door, push a button, and you show up somewhere else, just like on Star Trek, how you beam down to the surface. The question is, who ends up on the surface? Did Captain Kirk just get killed? And now there's a new replica of Captain Kirk on the surface? So that question is pretty profound if you've never thought of it before. But I'm the believer of, yeah, he just died, and now there's another one on the surface. It doesn't affect time moving forward as far as anybody's concerned. The person on the surface thinks they're Captain Kirk because they have all the same exact you know arrangement of atoms that Captain Kirk had. So the same memories, is the same wife, he has the same family, is the same, history of his career. Everything's the same. And no, he sees Spock and they all recognize each other. So there's nothing different, yet it's not really the same person. So in my opinion, when people talk about, let's say, having their brain scanned and put into a machine, and then they can live forever, I actually think they just died. So, these are interesting philosophical questions, but that's what I think.
Yeah, and
And
big philosophical questions also. So, today's 3D printer could evolve into tomorrow's transporter, right?
oh, well, yeah. Let me back up 1 second there because uh, there's a lot of philosophical questions. What happens when you die? Where do you go when you die? Where, is there a soul that's attached to you? There's all these kind of deep philosophical questions.
Yeah.
They're pretty much untestable because we can't take one subject and kill him and take another subject and not kill him and then compare them. Like we can't do that kind of stuff. But you can take, if we've chained a conscious machine, we can take that machine and, let's say, duplicate it. And then ask ourselves, well, did the soul just split in two? Is that what happened? Or maybe there is no soul. Or, what happens when we unplug it and wait, 20 days and then plug it back in? Can we ask it, did you go to God or something like that? I mean, there's so many philosophical questions. You can literally just, do the experiment and see what happens. So it's a really
Yeah.
interesting paradigm once we get to the point of that we have something that's, indistinguishable from humans in terms
The,
of
the,
their mental, yeah.
this to me, this is the singularity. It's everything all at once, and it's
Yeah.
all just kind of thrown together and with no time to figure it out, right? And
Right.
then who knows what comes out the other side.
Well, in fact, I was just listening to somebody who was saying, well, we might be kind of out of the singularity because these machines might start talking to each other and kind of bored with us. Maybe they'd rather communicate with the other machines and, do their own experiments, whatever, not be interested in us.
Well, so Dennis Bushnell, one of the NASA's chief scientists at Langley, I had talked to him many years ago about exploring the planets, and we were talking about manned space flight. And I believe I'd asked him, when do you think that we'll be exploring Mars? And his response to me was, our children already are. And what he meant was he was talking about the probes, right? The rovers, the probes, the landers, all of the machines that we have on Mars. And what I found was he had said that Ray Kurzweil spoke at NASA in, I believe, the late 90s. And he was talking about machine exploration of the galaxy, of the universe, the whole 9 yards. And so he kind of promoted that concept, I guess, which to me was really interesting. It's already underway, right? We're moving up this curve. Things that seem common become more extreme, and at some point it will just become unfathomable.
That's true. Really, you're basically saying that is our children. That will turn into our children. Basically, we're going, because it's not an event. It's a process.
It's a process.
And we're moving through that process. Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't answer your question before about the 3D printer. 3D printers are so interesting because for decades, I don't know if this is a little too much off subject, but for decades, people have said, they saw a UFO, there was no rivets or seams or anything. And then along came 3D printers. And now we can look at it and say, oh, they're probably built with 3D printers that are a billion years more advanced than ours. So that really, the day I thought of that for myself, my mind was kind of blown. But imagine a 3D printer that could print atom by atom, and all the things you could do that. I mean, you could have circuits that are inside a wall, as part of the structure, and the intelligence or the AI of it could be inside the wall or whatever, because everything is just being laid down as atoms by atoms. There could be chips basically built atom by atom inside that device. It's really fascinating.
Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Would not surprise me in the slightest. I think that a lot of preconceptions about UAP, but again, not just UAP, but about human spaceflight in the future and SETI and all of that, they come out of the golden era of science fiction, which was in the middle of the 20th century. And science and technology have moved so rapidly beyond that. There's a lot that we can take, and there's definitely a lot of honor and respect that we have to give to the people who came up with those ideas. But a lot of those are really outdated now.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think is funny, this related to what you're saying, and I might have missed kind of the big point of what you're saying, but I just want to throw this in there, is I think it's really funny that UFOs from the old movies were just this smooth, very simple shape with a dome on top. But then as movies progressed, the artists and everything decided that no, they should be like grungy and they should have a lot of detail on them and all this. But actually, in fact, those might have been more accurate way back when. So it's kind of almost the opposite of what I thought you just said.
Yeah, well, I think that we're on the same page. I think we were saying we're looking at it from different perspectives, though. And actually, when you mentioned that brought to mind Midjourney. So I do the Alt Propulsion Conference that you spoke at, and one of the things that I have to do is conference art, right? So I work with different artists for conference art. Yeah. I found a really amazing piece of art that I used a few months back, and I went to look up the artist. I had to do the permission and all that stuff. It turns out that was created in Midjourney. It was AI generative art. I had no idea. I was like, I love this piece. I have to use this. There was no creator. It was a machine that created it.
Yeah, that's just like our app. I mean, that once you put all that information in and train an AI on that, it really, I mean, whoever thought, back to, this ties in with so many things we just said, what careers are at stake? I'm not going to say artists aren't needed anymore, but wow, whoever thought that this AI, generative AI, would ever threaten art? It just seemed like that's the last thing a machine would ever do. But I mean, you can type in a sentence and boom, a picture comes up. It looks pretty good. It's really incredible. And again, emergent. I mean, people are trying to make it so that you type in a word and then this happens. But it's I think exceeding expectations how good it is.
Yeah, Mitch, on that note, let me close for today. We have covered so much ground, and I have a feeling we'll come back to this and cover even more in the future. But I think that we've probably blown enough minds for one day. So let me thank you so much for your time today. I love discussing the Singularity with you because you were all about the big picture ideas. And that, for me, that's exciting. It's where do things go? Where could things go? And today, I think one of the big ideas has been the singularity is happening right now. We're seeing this progress. So let me close by asking, where do you think this will go in the next few months?
Well, we're going to see ChatGPT 5. And for all we know, it's going to have something embodied in there that we're not ready for, because obviously they're not slowing down behind the scenes, So why would they release ChatGPT 5 if it's not a big step forward? So, that'll be a big one in the next couple of months. But there's just a lot going on. I mean, uh, one thing we're seeing is that these companies are basically putting some of the startups out of business because they're just integrating, OpenAI mostly is integrating into it some of the ideas that other companies were using their language model for, like making an agent out of it. So when you can do that, when you're the owner of the language model in the first place, you can do that in a different way. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing agents that are more functional. And by agents, I mean you give it a task and it thinks of how it's going to solve the task and tries to implement the task and then evaluates and then repeats that over and over again until it has solved your task. So that'll be a huge step forward. And I think that's on the horizon.
Mitch, let me thank you again so much for your time today, sir.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. My pleasure.